clock has struck 3 a.m. The witching hour has begun. Are you ready to be initiated into the Black Magic Coven? Join your sisters, Kaylee,
Liz,
Andrea,
and Marissa,
as we meet to discuss the macabre, creepy, and sinister. We call upon the Four Corners to summon the last settlers of Roanoke. All right, ladies, do you guys know anything about the lost colony of Roanoke?
I think I watched that season of American Horror Story, so.
Yeah, Kathy Bates was involved somehow.
Mm-hmm.
One of the original settlers, right? Oh, yeah.
I honestly really enjoyed that season of American Horror Story.
It is. It's really good.
It's fun. I enjoyed it too, actually.
It felt like it didn't take itself too seriously like some of the other seasons.
Yeah. I agree. It was also a simple enough plot all the way through, so.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious to rewatch it now because, I mean, I obviously didn't know as much as I do now researching for this episode during the time I watched that. But thinking about the parts of that season that I do remember, it does not seem at all relevant to the historical information given. It's like very far-fetched.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but initially, like, I didn't know too much, just they disappeared and, you know, not really, it was never really a thing I dove deep into.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I know as well. Just this colony disappeared. Where did they go?
Nobody knows. Okay, well, let's start from the top with just a little bit of history of kind of how it all started. So Roanoke Colony refers to two different attempts that were made by Sir Walter Raleigh to be the founder of the first permanent English settlement in North America. So that was on orders of Queen Elizabeth I. He was one of the guys that she sent out to start settling in North America. So the first Roanoke was established in 1585, and the governor was Ralph Lane. The colony included not really any women and children, and it was mostly a large amount of military men. But the colony failed rather quickly due to a lack of supplies. Obviously, when you're traveling across the seas in many boats, there's big storms, and they lost some of their supplies, and one of their ships was really badly damaged. So they weren't able to set up the colony for as large a group of people as they had initially thought they'd be able to when they left England. So the first Roanoke lasted approximately a year before Lane was like, forget this, let's go back to England. We'll try this again maybe later. So despite the failure...
Not
right, yeah. You didn't account for a shipwreck? Come on, dude, it's the 1500s.
Yeah.
Of course it's gonna happen.
If the women did this, they would have 3 extra boats.
Hell yeah.
They would have been totally prepared.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay, we lost a ship. We've got 4 extra. We prepared for this.
Yeah.
So despite the failure of the first attempt, Raleigh insisted that they give it another shot. He had a lot of pressure put on him by the Queen to basically get shit done and explore the lands and start settling people down. So this time the expedition was led by John White alongside Raleigh. So approximately 117 people agreed to make their new colony their home and start heading towards North America. Some of the folks included White's pregnant daughter and her husband, plus many women and children, which again, the first time around, there weren't really any women and children, and there were no real military involved in this settlement. And from what I read, there were mostly middle-class English people that, you know, were pretty well off and were just kind of like, well, we may as well embark into a new land. So the colonists set out on the seas. They arrive on July 25th, I put 1857, but it was 1587. 1587 just seems so far away.
It does.
In my mind, I kept typing 1800s instead of the 1500s. So it was 1587 that they land near Roanoke. They disembark, they get off the boats. Some of the men lead an expedition to find Lane's original colony, but when they discover it, they find, before they discover it, they face many attacks from the mainland tribes that had been there. And when they did eventually find Lane's original colony, it was dismantled and overgrown, specifically with melons, according to one of the articles I read. There was just melons growing everywhere. And a lot of the houses were no longer standing. And so they clearly had just kind of gave up on it. Fun fact, on August 15th, 1587, Virginia Dare was the first baby born to English parents in North America. So she's the first ever English settler, I guess, to be born in North America. But shortly after their birth, it became clear that once again, this expedition was not fully prepared. One of their ships, again, was damaged. They lost some of their supplies. The colonists started to realize kind of the desperate situation they were in, and they pleaded with Raleigh and White to return pleaded with White to return to speak with Raleigh, saying that they needed more assistance, that they were in desperate need of supplies. So White and his men departed for England on August 27th, 1587. They eventually arrived in England, and they are unfortunately met with the Spanish Armada mobilizing an attack, so that left them kind of stuck in England. They had no way really to leave with the war going on. They were stuck in England for 3 years, which is kind of insane. Can you imagine being those colonists? Just like, when are they coming back?
I just wonder on a normal voyage how long it would have taken back then to get from because it's like, oh, we're just gonna run back home real quick and grab some stuff.
We'll be back in a couple weeks. I will say one of the articles I read said specifically on the first or the second voyage to establish Roanoke, it was agreed upon on January 2nd or 7th, I can't remember, of 1587, and they arrived on July 25th of 1857. So it was a pretty, it's a long time, but it's not like it took 2 years to get there. Oh man, I said Tim, get rid of the ums.
I'm just picturing now because everybody's walking out of the house and like, oh, I forgot my mask. I got to run back inside. And instead it's like, no, you're in America and you got to go back to England by boat and like grab some guns and like food and rations.
I don't know.
Well, again, this goes into planning, have another voyage scheduled to come in like 6 months or like check up on you after a year, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I guess maybe back then I don't know. Did they just not have forethought like that?
Honestly, probably not.
They had no experience.
Have you guys either watched or read The Terror by Dan Simmons? The AMC turned it into a TV show. Mm-mm. And it's like an expedition from England, and they were completely not prepared, and they like paid this really cheap company to make their tinned goods, and everything was spoiling, and so it's like par for the course, it sounds like, for back then. Just, like, we're gonna expand and find new lands and make a colony and not think much of it.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully if we ever try to colonize Mars, we'll be a little bit more prepared.
Right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Doesn't it take like 5 years to get there?
Yeah. So we definitely can't just say, let's go back to Earth to get some more stuff.
Just make a quick run back to the planet Earth and I'll be right
back.
Not
if we make friends with night crawlers and use their magical pants.
Boom.
You're right. Oh
there
my gosh. Honestly, genius. I hope the night crawlers are what's keeping us together right now.
Modern solutions for modern problems.
Yeah. So they get to England to get more supplies, and they're essentially stuck in England. I didn't write a ton of notes on this, but when they do finally get to leave England, again, they face treacherous storms, and it takes them a little longer to get there than they originally would have because of the storms and some of the other things they faced. And on the morning of August 18th, 1590, so 3 years later, a group of sailors from 2 English ships made their way up a sandy beach to where they had left years before, essentially expecting to come across the colony that they had left behind pretty quickly. John White obviously had returned with the hopes to find, I put his wife, it's his daughter. He was hoping to find his daughter and her husband and his granddaughter, obviously now she's a toddler running around, or really any familiar face from the colony that he had left behind. I mean, when you think about it, 117 people, you probably get to know them all pretty quickly, right? Who's who. So White's calling out the name of his family, anyone else he knows, but he's met with no response. Instead, he finds that they had built a new fort in the years that he had been gone, but it appeared to have been abandoned and contained nothing but discarded and heavy items, which I don't know exactly what heavy items. I wish it was a little more specific.
So like
they left their gym equipment.
See, I was picturing they just disappeared, like all their personal belongings were there, but they actually like packed up and left.
Yes. This was not like a Langoliers style disappearance, you know?
Honestly, that the first I ever heard of Roanoke, I don't remember who told me, but I remember them talking about it and them saying that when they returned to the colony, like food was sitting on the fires and clearly it seemed as if they'd almost just vanished into thin air.
That's what I was picturing in my brain. Yeah.
When I initially heard this story, that was my understanding, was like it seemed that they had been there moments ago or minutes ago and suddenly not a single soul was in sight. But what actually happened was, it turns out some things had been left behind. Many of the houses in the settlement had been dismantled, seemingly in a somewhat hurriedly fashion, but I don't really know like how those houses were dismantled or assembled to begin with, so I don't know. I tried to read a little more about what exactly they looked like or how exactly they were put together, but I couldn't find much about it. But specifically, it mentioned that it seemed as if it had been a rushed process that the homes were dismantled. But none of the 117 original members of the colony were ever located. So the only thing that was found that could even give some sort of a clue to maybe what would have happened was the word Croatoan was carved on a fence, and then the letters CRO were carved in a nearby tree located within kind of the boundaries of the settlement. So there was the Croatoa that were a friendly tribe that was located relatively close to where they had settled, but there hasn't really been any proof that there's a tie to that. And I did also read in one article that the colonists had been instructed to carve the word Maltese in a tree or a post if they had been forced to leave, but there was no sign of that.
See, that was another thing. Like, I was reading some information, and one of the sources I was looking at said that if there was signs of distress and they were forced to leave, then they would, write where they were going and put a cross underneath, or like carve a cross underneath. So I don't know. I've read just some conflicting information about this, but it's funny because like I picture this CRO carved somewhere else as them first trying to like get the hang of their knife and like spell out the words. And they're like, that doesn't look that good. Let me try it again on this one. It's like, oh yeah, that C and that R and O looks much better. Yeah, I mean, I don't. It seems so ridiculous. It doesn't really seem symbolic to me. But I will say though, from personal experience, if a really good modern use of this word is if you ever have a hookup and don't want to talk to the person again, write Croatoan on a piece of paper or like on their mirror in lipstick and just, that's like the original form of ghosting. Like you get the point across. Get out.
Honestly, walking into a bathroom and just seeing Croatoan in red lipstick, I would just lose it.
Oh man, I opted for like the pen and paper just because I didn't want to use my lipstick on the mirror. But definitely suggest this to anyone who needs to use this in the future. Croatoan can get you out of some sticky situations.
I almost choked on my drink when I first read that note you made about it. So. It's genius. I can't believe I've never thought of that. So Croatoan, the only sign of anything from the former settlers of this colony. There's no sign of human remains, no sign of anything other than the fact that they were definitely there at one point and now they're nowhere to be found. So now we go into the many theories of what could have happened to them. So there's a lot, I will say, because the word Croatoan had been carved into a tree. Like I said, the men originally suspected that they had relocated nearby to the Croatoan island. But the weather was bad. Andrea, you were talking about this earlier. And the men were unable to travel by boat. So they were just like, maybe they're not there. Maybe they are. They weren't able to get to them.
It seems pretty obvious that, like, okay, they packed up. There's no mass graves. There's not like a big, like it doesn't appear that there was any sort of battle, but they had been threatened by local tribes. Because, like, I know on the first expedition, I don't remember who it was. They killed a leader of like a native tribe.
Yes,
there was like there was like beef going on here.
Yeah, they beheaded him. Didn't they behead him?
I
believe so.
They killed him in a really gnarly, disrespectful way. Yeah.
And those were the military guys. And then you bring these families in, are like, hey, live here. This is going to be great. But then you have these friendly natives, the Croatoans. So, like, it makes sense if they were to be like, hey, we need help. You got to get us the F out of here. That they were like, okay, come on, let's go. But I also liked the theory that John White was kind of a D-bag, and when he went back for supplies, they were all like, this is our chance to get, like, and they just like ghosted him.
Yeah.
While he was in England getting supplies.
The original ghosting, yeah.
Like, funny joke, guys. We're not here anymore.
Like, he's gone. Let's head out,
His daughter's like, fuck you, Dad.
Yeah.
Changes her name. Time.
Dyes her hair a different color to join her father in rebellion.
Yeah. So apparently also...
Okay.
Oh, wait, what?
So they didn't check the island at all?
So from what I've read, no. So the weather was bad, which weather comes and goes, so I don't know why they didn't just wait it out. But John White was like, we need to go to Croatoan Island, right, to see if they're there. And his crew refused.
But come on, you guys. He tried twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's his daughter and his granddaughter, who he's never met. Yeah. And after 2 attempts, what I read was then he was just like, I'm going back home. And then he moved to Ireland and lived his life.
And there were, I can't remember the name of the other guy. In 1602 and 1603, 2 other men took it upon themselves to make a mission to go check this island and see if they could find the settlers, because people high up were pissed that essentially they just lost 117 people with no trade. So in 1602 and 1603, 2 separate missions were also thwarted by bad weather on the seas. And I also read one of the ships was intercepted by French pirates as well.
Ooh.
That sounds
so. The ships never actually, they never actually reached their destination.
But we're looking at this part of the country, and like, this is not a huge area. Like, how far did this boat really have to go? Like, how bad was this weather? I'm just
you do also have to think, like, those ships were huge, right? Yeah, John White couldn't just hop on the ship and be like, all right, fuck you guys, I'll go by myself. Like, he needed a whole crew of men to make it happen.
I'm picturing like year-long hurricanes.
Yeah.
The distance is apparently 3,795 miles.
Whoa, that's way farther than I thought.
Yeah, so, I mean...
The Proclaimers would walk that, okay?
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's lame that he gave up only after 2 tries. I wonder if that were his sons, if he would try harder, honestly, because women were so disposable, like, fuck it, I'm gonna go to Ireland and find me another woman, make some more kids, make some Irish kids,
Maybe this time I'll get a boy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And she did also have a daughter. If she had a son, it could have also been a different story.
Yeah. It's sad that I think that,
invested in the other 100 people, though. Like, wouldn't you stay for a few years at least? I think it's very strange that he was just like, oh, okay, I can't get there because the weather's bad, so bye.
Guess I'll go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is unusual. It is. I agree, and I read more, about it, but it just seems like weather kept getting to them. Which honestly, maybe there's some magic in play here. Maybe they didn't want to be found.
What if the whole group was just like
back from England than he did looking for them?
I don't know. I mean, maybe they just didn't care. Maybe that was just like a whole group of rejects that they just didn't want anymore. And it was just like some huge sacrifice. Like, yeah, we're just going to go over there, drop them off, and then I'll, give them supplies that won't work out. I'll head back, say I'm going to come back, and then don't. But then we'll pretend to just for like, show
and maybe
face.
That's specifically why they made a point in articles to say, like in writings of it, that they were mostly middle class English folk. They were in good positions. So they're like, no, it's not like they were poor people. We just, you're right, just a big sacrifice.
I don't feel like they were really that worried about being open about not caring about poor people, though. So I feel like they probably just would have said, like, yeah, we just didn't really like the poor people. So
that's true. Yeah.
I don't think they were really hiding it back then as much as they probably do now.
But these people specifically were not of the poor. Like, they were pretty
yeah.
They weren't rich, but they were like in a decent way of life there,
Yeah.
Who knows? But I do have some theories.
Tell us your theories.
Okay. Yeah.
These aren't my personal theories, but this was my favorite part of reading things because there's so many theories. And some of them I didn't really write down because they clearly are just a stretch. Or there's no, I don't know, backing to it, but
so it's like you're watching Room 237 and you're like, okay, well, this one maybe, but this one, whoa.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Well, like there's one on witchcraft, which is interesting because like the Croatoan people did believe in certain spiritual things and ideologies and stuff, but the theory was just kind of like, what if they crucified them because they were witches? Or what if they were witches and what if the, native tribes were actually witches? It just felt very like a circular thing. But my favorite is the word Croatoan has apparently been connected to other mysteries in the past, specifically disappearances. One is before Edgar Allan Poe passed away, he went missing for a short period of time. And when he was seen again, he was in a delirious state and wasn't really making much sense. And one of the final words that he muttered was apparently Croatoan. And to this day, we're not really sure how Edgar Allan Poe died. From what I understand, his medical records were lost, so nobody knows if he was under the influence or if he was suffering from something. Croatoan has also appeared in other disappearances. In 1888, Black Bart, which was a notorious stagecoach robber, carved the word into his prison cell wall shortly before being released, and he was never seen from or heard again. Just carved Croatoan.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, the word also was found in Amelia Earhart's journal after she disappeared in 1937. And the final bed that Ambrose Bierce slept in, he's an author, before he disappeared in 1913, had the word Croatoan carved into one of the bedposts. So Croatoan really was the original ghosting, apparently.
So if I want to fake my death, then I have to scribble this word somewhere. That's what you're telling me. Okay,
that's exactly right.
Sorry, I said I think it's obvious. It has to be aliens. Like all these people were either abducted or were like inhabited by an alien being, and so the Croatoan is like the glue that holds it all together.
So I was trying to find the meaning of the word, like if there's any sort of what is it? It says the word could be a combination of two words that mean town council, or where's the other one? I lost it. Or
so maybe the settlers. Oh, go ahead.
Talk town or council town is what it could be. A combination of words. It's not a scary.
So my other thought is that maybe the settlers actually did see the Fresno Nightcrawlers. They all decided to put them on as payment. And then they were transported into a parallel dimension. But beforehand, they wrote Croatoan really quick.
Yeah, just give us 5 minutes before we go. I have to get this out. Let me carve this real quick. Oh, fuck, I messed up. Let me start over. Okay.
I can't stop thinking about Andrea. Was it you who was like, if you saw a pair of pants in the woods, would you try them on? And now I'm just imagining a bunch of English settlers like, oh, look at those pants
In
Would you put 'em on?
Dude, they probably looked so comfy to them back in the day too. Like, especially to them. They're like, oh, those clean, shiny pants look so enticing.
No matter how much I wash my clothes, they're never that clean.
With my
I'm
washboard in
kind
the
of
river.
sad though, because like I was thinking about like poor Lavinia, and like if she just would have written Croatoa like on her jail cell, maybe she could have like pieced out and been in another dimension having fun with the Nightcrawlers.
Right.
It's all
like-
come full circle.
Wow, we're tying all of our stories together.
Well, it also makes me
And
think
they all
of,
just
like,
walked up the stairs in Seoul, Kansas.
Yeah, and then they emerged there. It makes me think of Beetlejuice too, like drawing a door on the wall with chalk and you just push through it and you're like gone, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they did with, maybe if you write Croatoan on a tree, it just opens up and you walk inside and then it
That'd
closes.
be fucking awesome.
They're all in Christmas Town.
Yes. Oh my
I did
God.
think of a tie though to the Lavinia Fisher story, being in North Carolina and the whole naval base thing and the land grab. Is Kaylee, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was something to that too. Like that was the whole point of them scouting, right? It was they were trying to find a good place to build a base.
Yeah.
And they were still doing that. Like that was like what, 100, 200 years later?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, it's just, I don't know.
I mean, that's a lot of land to steal. Like,
yeah.
just
Well,
pick a place. I don't know.
we stole the whole country, so here we are. I have to go back to Croatoan on a sticky note really quick or a mirror because now, Marissa, all I'm thinking is like a dude finding a door in a bathroom.
Oh my God. I'm telling you, it really gets the point across without having to be a complete bitch or really awkward. So
Never to be seen again. Another theory is cannibalism. Although this one, I think personally, to me, seems especially far-fetched because there were no remains found at any point, even despite, digging years and years later and looking for any trace of bones or any kind of remains. They didn't find any. But kind of the theory of, were the members of the colony victims to cannibalism? Were they taken and that was somebody used them to survive? Or were they required to turn to it for survival?
Zombie outbreak.
That's another theory, though, the zombie outbreak. I mean, the tribes in those areas weren't cannibalistic, so...
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's the other thing, is the theory that kind of crumbles unless they were eating each other. But then where are all the remains?
where are the bones?
Yeah.
Well,
and
actually,
where's all their stuff?
You can chop up bones and, grind them and make them into medicine, or people would, consume bones that way.
Sure.
But that's a lot of effort.
I was thinking you grind it down and put it in flour and make bread out of it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also seems like what?
Oh, I was just gonna say that's like the Jack and the Beanstalk giants. They say they're gonna
Ground his bones.
grind their bones and make flour for my bread or whatever.
Yeah.
Valid.
Oh my God, maybe that's what it is all along. It's Jack the Giant. No, not Jack the Giant. Jack's the kid that climbs the beanstalk. Right? What is the giant's name? Does he have one?
Does the giant have a name?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
No, I don't think they named the giant. He's just a nameless villain that's a jerk.
Yeah.
But honestly, Jack is actually the jerk, so it's kind of
Climb the beanstalk into some dude's home.
What if they just
to be fair,
misspelled?
Jack is a colonizer. He's trying to take over the giant's home, and so maybe the giant that lived in that land just decided, I'm done with these colonizers and I'm gonna eat all of them.
Well, did you see Mickey and the Beanstalk? They were so hungry.
Honestly, we've come full circle again. We're back to cannibalism. Turns out it's a hot topic. Another theory. What?
Sorry, I was just gonna say they could have tossed. They're like on the ocean, right? Like they're right there.
That's true.
Nobody's dredging the ocean floor for like bone,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like they could have. Okay, that was another thing too. It's like their bodies could have easily just been tossed into the ocean, or maybe they just like misunderstood Kraken for Croatoan, like the monster of the sea
Oh
just
my
came
God,
up and ate them all, or they were just like on a ship trying to get back, and then they got eaten by a giant sea monster. I don't know, but they could very well have just like packed up and gone to another place, or just been slaughtered and thrown into the sea.
Truly, yeah. There's so many. There's no evidence, so it could have been literally like there's an endless amount of things.
Yeah, it's basically like, how could you kill 117 people without leaving a trace? And then your mind just goes off.
Yeah.
Wild
Monsters,
pigs.
aliens.
Pigs.
Yeah, wild pigs.
Wild pigs.
Witchcraft is often mentioned as something that could have been utilized, whether native people thought that members of the colony were suspected of witchcraft, although they weren't known for being violent towards, that ideology, or were there witches in the woods that came and took them and killed them. That's also another theory. Which seems very far-fetched, but there's apparently a lot of stories, specifically in like North Carolina lore, about witches and spirits in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't dig too deep into that, so if any of you know more stories, but
I don't know. I mean, they could have just assimilated, like, I mean, Native Americans either could have killed them off and disposed of all of their bodies, or, they relocated and integrated with a tribe and started a new life,
Yeah,
Honestly,
I mean,
that sounds the most likely. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't do a ton of research into this, but one of the Nat Geo documentaries I found on YouTube was talking about that there was actually a claim for government assistance at some point, and I should have made better notes. But that there was in genealogy, white heritage or British heritage in the bloodlines of some of these people that indicated that there was. And I know certain tribes had a thing about keeping women and children as captives and killing the men. And so that would have made sense. I think there was maybe if I could be wrong, I think it was 80 men. And the rest were female or children that they killed the men and then assimilated the women and children into their tribe.
Yeah, that's totally plausible.
That seems to be, I know I was going to get to it a little later, but we may as well talk about it now. Where is it? There was a 2020 article that came out specifically from the New York Times that talks about that, how the natives there probably took in the settlers, or they assimilated with them and started living their lives together. And the theory specifically is based on English artifacts that were found alongside Native American artifacts that seem to correlate with the time frame of when those English settlers would have been in that place of time. But there are some arguments against it, specifically because it's not uncommon to discover things like that, whether it's Native American artifacts or early English artifacts, because obviously Native Americans were around for so long and the Englishmen were just discovering and traipsing through those areas. So losing things wouldn't be an unusual thing. But that's what certain people base a lot of their research on, is the artifacts that have been found.
Yeah, because I saw that there were a couple of different things found. There was a writing tablet, a slate of stone, maybe a couple fragmented bowls, and I think I forget the technical term of it, but they're basically copper cylinders or something that hold woolen fibers, some stuff like that. That was the only thing that they had found remnants of. But and then it is interesting to kind of look at DNA, though. I think that if people stay on this later down the road, more and more will be discovered as technology advances, especially within DNA and tracking like that.
Right, I'm sure.
One thing I wish I would have had time to look more into was the really amazing map that was created during the first settlement, I believe. And it was super detailed, and cartographers have looked at it and were just kind of amazed at how accurate it was. But there was like hidden things in it. So there was one part where it looked like it was like a 4-pointed star that had like red around it and then blue in the middle, or it might be backwards. And that was either where they wanted to build a fort or where a fort had been built. And then like Croatoa Island was in red. And they were thinking that was either meaning that was either a good or a bad place to visit. They weren't sure. But what fascinated me was that they were using like invisible ink back then, and they either used like lemon juice or some derivative of cow's milk. And did you guys read anything about any of that? Yeah, I should have written more down. It was very interesting, but the map is gorgeous. Like you can go online and see it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was super interesting to me.
Yeah, that's like what I was telling you guys before we even started. There's really so much to this story that I feel like when I first started reading it, it was all, kind of the spooky theories and hearing the story initially of just they came in and it looked like they had essentially just vanished into thin air because there was still food cooking and there was toys out. It looked like children had been playing, but then finding out that's really not what happened. And there's so much history to this settlement and also the tribes that were living in that area at the time.
Yeah, the map just reminded me of National Treasure. Like Nick Cage needs to come to decipher this.
I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. One more theory was this one. They call them the Dare Stones. These stones were apparently found between 1937 and 1940, and apparently were written by John White's daughter. They just said "fuck you, Dad" on them. No, I'm just kidding. The inscription on the first stone read, Ananias Dare, which I believe was her husband. I don't know if I pronounced his name right. And Virginia went hence unto heaven, 1591. An Englishman shew John White, Governor via. I don't know what the last part of that means. But the other side of the stone said that only 7 members remained and that the rest had been killed by Native Americans. And it was signed EWD, which stands for Eleanor White Dare, which was her name. In 1940, 57 more stones were found, dating until 1599. Some of the stones read things like one from 1592 claims that they are alive and living with a tribe in Nakuchi Valley in Georgia. One dated from 1598 claims that Eleanor Dare had married the local chief. Another stone claimed that she had given birth to the chief's daughter and the tribe was angry about it, and Eleanor requested that her father bring the girl back to England with him. A stone dated from 1599 stated Eleanor Dare had died and that she had a daughter named Agnes that survived her. By 2019, all the stones but the first discovered had been deemed unauthentic, so they were taken by the Smithsonian Institute, and they all did research and checked them out and essentially figured out that every one of those stones came from a time period that was way in the future and was not actually from the 1500s, except the one stone they found that said only 7 members of the colony remained.
So aliens made the stones and then went back in time and planted them so they look like they're from the future.
Yes, that's exactly right.
All
In
right.
the 1500s. So they couldn't be carbon dated. So they would never know.
You heard it here first.
You're welcome, everyone. Breaking news. So those were some of the theories I specifically read about and wrote down. Did you guys see any others in research that were interesting to you, or?
I think those were the ones that really stuck out to me the most. There's the logical ones that completely make sense, and then there's the far-fetched ones. But I mean, as much as I would like to think far-fetched, aliens or zombies, like I really just think that these people either up and moved or they just took up with a tribe or they were like all slaughtered. I think they actually like assimilated though. Like I don't think that they were all killed. Maybe some were killed. I could see some being killed for sure, especially the men, like you were saying.
Yeah, that just makes the most sense.
Well, and especially because they were expecting their fearless leader to just like run and grab supplies and come right back. And then it's like 3 years. They don't know that England is going to war with Spain. And so they're just sitting there like waiting, and he's not coming back, and they're getting attacked. And so it definitely makes sense for them to join like a stronger, friendly group of people that's going to help them.
Yeah, they can't just pick up the phone and check in. Hey, y'all on your way back yet?
Well, and going back to witchcraft, Kaylee, that you were talking about earlier, I mean, I think some of the reasons why natives thought that they were associated with witchcraft was because that there were so many Native Americans dying upon their arrival because they weren't immune to the viruses and, the illnesses that they were bringing over. So they would see people get sick and die, but they didn't have the medical or biological understanding that they brought over illnesses that were killing people off.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's another reason that, makes me think that sure, some would die and then sure, some were kept.
Right, especially if they lost, so many people at one time because diseases tend to spread so quickly like that.
Right.
And then maybe there was only 12 people left, and it was kind of, they saw they weren't able to fend for themselves, and,
kind of bouncing around a little bit, but I was thinking about England just like leaving these people there. But I was just thinking about them going to war with Spain, and to me, this is all very reminiscent of kind of the race to Mars or to the moon. And who can get there first was like, we're going to go colonize America. We're going to be first. And Spain's like, no, we're going to do it first. And like not wanting to admit defeat. And so we're just going to pretend this didn't happen and then move on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's probably a big part of it. Yeah. We heard you lost 117 colonists.
Prove it. Where are they?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, so I guess, honestly, like you said, Marissa, with genealogy and whatnot advancing over the years, I'm sure someday we'll be able to get a clearer picture with DNA if they were assimilated or if they were, they ended up joining a tribe. But
and I would really be curious to hear a perspective from someone who is Native, and maybe if, they still have like people from these specific tribes in those areas. Like I have some friends and some exes who are Native American, but they're from different tribes and regions, like more so Oklahoma and like Alaska and Canada. But I would be very curious to hear about Native American perspectives from that area. But I couldn't really find a lot of information on that from a Native perspective, unfortunately. So if anyone's out there who has that, I would be very curious.
Yeah, shoot us a message. Well, as you guys know, there's a lot of pop culture references. Specifically, we talked about American Horror Story, which was season 6. If you've never seen it, it's just the Roanoke season. I would recommend it. American Horror Story is cool because I think you can jump around in different seasons, and if you hated season 3, well, season 5 might be great. And season 6, I think, was a lot of fun. I had a great time watching it. I won't give too much away because there's kind of it's a simple story, but it's good if you just watch it. That, I think, is one of the most notable references I found. Supernatural, not surprisingly, had an episode where Croatoan was referenced. It was set in an Oregon town filled with people that were infected with a highly contagious virus. And
they got like black eyes or something too. I feel like I remember watching that episode.
Yeah, it said it was an early episode.
Yeah, it was like in the early season. So, and I just remember because my friend and I used to watch that show together. And however one of the brothers says Croatoan, we used to say it like that like we would just be like Croatoan. Like I don't know, like it was just the way he said it was really funny to us, and we would always repeat it. So
speaking of eyes, that actually made me remember that there was this little tidbit that I found that a couple hundred years later or whatever, there were a group of visitors that found, I think it was like in the early 1700s, that found a tribe of Indians with light skin and gray blue eyes and light brown hair that did speak English. And they were thought to have been like the lost, settlers who had maybe assimilated with the Croatoan tribe and, the colonists in the tribe, I guess. But the kids definitely looked different than their elders. I had forgotten that. Yeah.
Have any of you seen Frozen 2?
No. I haven't seen the first Frozen.
Same.
Okay,
I
well,
saw the first
Frozen
one.
2, like, spoiler alert, Elsa ends up being, like, related to a tribe of people. And I just remember rolling my eyes so hard because I'm like, how is this pale, blonde, blue-eyed chick, like, related to this group of native people? And so maybe that's how. Maybe she was
She was like
actually one of the.
Well, I used to kind of be weird about that too, because I'm a natural blonde and I have blue eyes, but I'm Spanish but I'm super white. I'm super pale. And so I never really got that because I'm like French, Irish, and then Spanish, but I don't look Spanish. But when I went over to Spain, when I was backpacking and went through Spain, I mean, they hit me like a nail on the head. Like they knew right away looking at me that I was Spanish, which was really interesting.
I am also Spanish, Marissa. I have like a small, like my dad's dad was, and I am the super pale as well. But I have the dark hair naturally. That's like the only, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's like certain parts of Spain that have lighter skin, lighter features, lighter hair. And it's the same thing with Brazil, like you think that these certain places and regions have, then they do primarily, but there are certain regions of countries that have lighter, fair skin and it's kind of interesting. But yeah, it was like overwhelming when I went to Spain. Like I had never been called out like that, I guess, before. Not like called out in a bad way, but just like, shit. Like I definitely don't know what you're saying right now. I'm like 22, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah. But I mean, my name itself is Spanish, but it's just, I just don't look Spanish,
Sure. Yeah.
At least in the American sense. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I had totally forgotten that little tidbit. But I didn't see a whole bunch of other references than, the Roanoke was the biggest one for me with American Horror Story, which, is a really fun season. That's probably one of my favorites.
The Last American Vampire as well, the book. One of the characters was a settler in the Lost Colony, and all the settlers had disappeared because they were murdered by a vampire named Dr. Crowley.
Okay, I kind of love that as a theory that there was like vampirism going on and like a couple of the settlers got turned and like started eating their fellow settlers and then they dispersed and like flew off as bats.
Honestly, like there's so many fun theories that you can, and it makes sense why this specific story, even though it's such a historical story, like it really has a lot of historical importance. But the fact that they disappeared just allows for so many interpretations as to what could have happened. So, I mean, I think that makes sense why it's inspired so many. Like, obviously, American Horror Story Roanoke is a big stretch to what actually happened in the story, but it's interesting.
Well, you've got to think that they were either being held captive or they did not want to be found, because back then, like, somebody could have, thrown a letter in a jar or tried to make some sort of communication. And I think it's strange if the stones are fake, or even if they're not, that there wasn't any other attempt at like making communication, even generations later, leaving like verbal stories down to their kids, like, hey, you come from this place, go find your ancestors.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point too, but maybe they just never thought. Well, you guys have any other thoughts on Roanoke?
It was aliens.
Yeah.
Not the night crawlers.
I mean, I don't know. I'm still not convinced the night crawlers are aliens, though. I think they're spirits.
Yeah, I like that theory too. Well, I guess that does it for Roanoke. What has cast a spell on you ladies lately this last week?
So for me, I just watched earlier today, actually. So Trixie Mattel and Katya, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name. They're drag queens, both very famous from RuPaul's Drag Race. And they have a show on YouTube. So they had an original show called and that's just literally what it's called. But then they also have a show with Netflix, like they've partnered up with Netflix, called Queens Who Like to Watch. Ooh. And it's just them reacting to Netflix products or like things that are on Netflix. But right now they actually have like a super episode where they just watch horror movies. And so they've watched The Witches, Scream, Poltergeist, Gerald's Game, and there was one other one I can't remember now. But they just react to it, and I just was dying laughing. So anybody that loves horror and enjoys a good laugh, I would highly recommend trying to find that particular episode on YouTube. I mean, if you just search Queens Who Like to Watch Scream or something like that, you'll find it. But they're absolutely hilarious, and it's just really fun to just look back on all these classic horror movies that I love and see them kind of react to these movies, because it's really fun to just see their, they're so funny. So I was telling Blair that I'm like, hey, I wish that they would just do Mystery Science Theater, but with Trixie and Katya, because I would watch the heck out of that. So I don't know, we'll see, maybe someday. But that's my that's what's put a spell on me this week.
I love it.
So mine is a book. It's a novella called Sour Candy by Keelan Patrick Burke, and it actually came out in 2015, and I just found it. And it's very short, quick read, but it's like horror, sci-fi. It has a little bit of everything, and I don't want to give too much away, but it has a lot of talking points about people that have kids and people that don't have kids, and I highly recommend everybody read it and then find me on social media so we can talk about it, because I need to talk about this book and I don't know anyone else that's read it.
Awesome. It's called Sour Candy. Is that what you said?
Yes, Sour Candy. And so I just found this amazing thing called Hoopla. I don't know if you guys are on it, but you can sign up for like an e-library card.
Yeah.
And then
fun.
Free books, movies, ebooks, audiobooks, and that's where I got it. So I actually read it for free through the library.
Yeah, that's great.
Andrea, if you don't have Canopy yet, Canopy spelled with a K.
Okay, I don't.
It's also amazing, and you can get it with your library card as well. It's almost like Criterion Collection level. Like, it's really cool way of watching movies. They have a lot of good stuff on there. They had all of A24 for a while.
Awesome.
So it's definitely worth it. And you get I think you get to rent or check out 10 movies a month, and it's totally free. It's just with your library card.
Oh, that's great.
I'm going to sign up immediately.
Yeah.
I have a couple of things this week that were putting a spell on me that I really liked. One of them, both of them are Native American influence. So one of them is a show that was on Netflix called Chambers. Did y'all check that out or hear of it? So it had Uma Thurman in it, and I really liked it, but it got canceled after one season. I still suggest watching that one season because it's like a supernatural horror show, and it stars Native American cast who are actually Native American, not Uma Thurman, obviously, but and then it's about a young girl who gets a heart transplant from an upper middle class. Uma Thurman's daughter is like an upper middle class, girl, dies in a car wreck, and then a girl on a reservation who's Native gets her heart as a transplant, and so then she starts experiencing supernatural things are kind of going on. Uma Thurman and her husband feel so bad about they don't feel bad, but they're happy that their daughter is living on it in a different way. And so they bring this young girl off of her reservation into the best schools. They hook her up with the best clothes. And so there's this interesting culture clash between high high society and being white versus being native and on reservations, and how she's sort of trying to like grapple with this new identity that she has while literally having this girl's heart and experiencing supernatural stuff that's going on. So it's really cool. It's only 10 episodes, but it was pretty intriguing, and it gave rise to a lot of Native American voices in, TV that you don't usually see. Like, you don't usually see a lot of. I thought I'd just drop that. The main actress's name is, I might butcher this, so forgive me, Sivan Alira Rose. And then I think Griffin Powell Arkand too. And the writers and the production team also have Native American people on board. So it's really good. It's only one season, but I really enjoyed it. And then another book that I'm reading right now that's really good. I'm not super far into it, but it's called The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones.
That one's on my list.
I've heard great things about that.
Yeah, it's he's actually Blackfeet Native American, and he's a Texan. He was born in West Texas, so that's pretty cool. And he's written a couple of books, but he's primarily into like horror fiction, crime fiction, science fiction. And I'm not super far into it, but it's basically like a dramatic narrative with social commentary as well. These American Indian men have a disturbing event that happens in their youth that they're trying to grapple with. And, there's some revenge elements in there, and trying to, like, I guess, make up for something terrible that happened. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a lot of touching on, like, breaking away from tradition, which is also kind of interesting. And it was described as, like, his latest novel is he's like described as the Jordan Peele of horror literature, which I thought was kind of interesting. So but yeah, it has really good score on Goodreads, and I just started that a couple of days ago and I'm enjoying it so far.
So
awesome.
Not to add too much, I would like to bounce something else off of that is just amazing. Speaking of spotlighting like Native Americans, Blood Quantum is now on Shudder. It was a 2019 zombie movie. I do not like zombie movies traditionally. Like, it's not my genre. But it is just absolutely amazing. The acting, the directing, the special effects. I highly, highly recommend. If you have Shudder, go watch it. If you don't have Shudder, go get Shudder because you need it, and watch Blood Quantum.
Yeah, Shudder's great. I've been meaning to watch that. I'll have to check that out. So for me, mine's much more simplistic. One of my favorite breweries in the city, this is going to be mostly local, but Torn Label Brewing Company just released one of my all-time favorite beers. It's called The Witch. It's a artist collaboration with, I can't remember her name, but she works at Oddities Prints in Kansas City. And the beer is kind of loosely inspired by the movie The Witch. And this beer specifically is a Gruit style ale. So do any of you guys know what a Gruit style beer is?
Teach us.
No.
Okay, I'll teach you the ways. So Gruit is an old, like, traditional style way to brew. It was an ancient herbed ale. So instead of using hops to add flavor to the beer or add bitterness to the beer, they would use particular spices or herbs or plants. So this beer specifically is a black ale, Gruit style beer, brewed with rosemary, sage, and black currant. And it is, they release it, they originally released it as a one-time beer, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And they didn't release it again for a year. And there was so much request for it, they decided just to brew it. And every October they re-release the beer. And it's my favorite beer of all time. And, well, one of them. And so every year when it comes out, I get super excited. And I went and it came out today, and I picked up a couple 4-packs before I recorded my podcast, and I'm drinking one right now. Nice. So if you're local and you can get your hands on The Witch, I highly recommend it. And you like beer. That's another
Sounds
thing.
delicious.
Well, Kaylee, I do have to say that the Haribo Sour Vampire Bats, one of the flavors is black currant.
Is it really?
So it would probably pair really nicely with that beer.
Well, now I have to go get some of those. I'll update you and let you know how they pair.
Okay.
Well, I think that's it.
And if you've liked what you've heard, interact with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Black Magic Coven. Be sure to use the hashtag Black Magic Coven. Rate, review, and subscribe on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple iTunes, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And this concludes the gathering of the Black Magic Coven.
You're listening to a Downright Creepy original on the Crickets Podcast Network.